Hi everybody and welcome to another Kalicube Tuesdays. Today I'm here with Olesia Korobka, who's sitting in Armley in the north of England. Is that correct?
Right, in the middle of England.
The middle of England, very good point. I actually come from very nearby, so I know Armley a little bit, but I didn't go there very often. But maybe I'll come up in the summer and say hello. So today we're talking about geeky tips for content optimization for 2024 and beyond with Olesia Korobka. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Olesia Korobka.
Hi.
Brilliant. This is going to be great. You're super smart, and geeky tips for content optimization is something we all need. And thinking ahead so that we're sure that we're ready for 2024 is hugely important. And I know that you have the 5 takeaways to share at some point. So even if people can't keep up with the geeky stuff you're talking about all the way through, they're going to get the 5 takeaways. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You may share my screen now. I'll show what I was going through when I was preparing for this talk because it's quite funny. So I decided that those are a few things, very little things that we can talk about, and they only concern images, and images are like a very, very small part of content if you choose. So you might imagine that it's like stop sharing. A very, very big area. So like if you start sharing tips, you need to go into some basics, you need to go into some theory, and most people don't like that. They say, I know all this stuff already, just tell me what moves the needle. But when you are trying to explain only what moves the needle, it appears that only works under certain circumstances with a certain type of content in certain niches, and has this disclaimer, and also has its usage within seasons or within some other aspects that you want to consider before you are showing them. So I decided to concentrate just on a few things that are easy for everyone and are easy to repeat and are easy to follow and don't need these technical background.
Right. And will work in most circumstances for most people. That's brilliant. Before we get into that, we look at brand SERPs always, and this is your brand SERP. With you right at the top there with your website and your Twitter boxes. You're very active on Twitter, so you get Twitter boxes. You can see that you tweet once every day most of the time. Is that fairly accurate?
I decided to do that before this talk so that it was actually, but I'm rarely on Twitter. To be
right,
honest.
okay. So you actually prepared and you knew I was going to do that, so you made sure that it would look cool. Here's something maybe you didn't think about.
What?
This. It says Olesia Korobka on LinkedIn is the international SEO consultant and founder of Oranti, maker of SEO FOMO, which is actually Lady Solis. So
Yes,
it's given you the description of Lady Solis.
No, I didn't take her description. It's wrongly picked up by Google.
Exactly. Sorry, and that was the explanation. I was very surprised to see that. And what it's done is it's taken from the list of people on the right-hand side, somebody, in this case, a leader, and put that as your description, even though it's a semantic HTML5 aside, which means it shouldn't. And the reason I find that it's stunning that it would do that, because an aside explicitly says this isn't part of the main content, and yet it's using it. And what I found out yesterday is it did the same thing with Kalicube the other day. So semantic HTML5, Google apparently doesn't pay that much attention to the aside aspect of it, and it gets mixed up by trying to be too clever and picking a description it thinks works, but in fact doesn't because it's the wrong person.
And what's worse is that it went into Bard also as well. And if you try to ask Bard about me, it generates like the same description and from Aleda's profile. Yeah. And
oh wow. Okay, so it's very confused.
Bing doesn't do that, and ChatGPT doesn't do that. So it's just Google's parser or something with their parser that they're using, but that helps to understand that the parser, like the crawler they're using to pick up this information for their SERPs and for Bard, Maybe similar.
Right, which would imply that that description is written with Bard.
I'd be not sure to do that. They might use the same crawler, but not necessarily the same system to
But then it
personalization.
would be two different algorithms coming to the same conclusion, which would be unlikely. But that's a debate for another day. We don't know. We've got no idea. It's just an interesting point. Be very careful about what Google's pulling out of pages to show in your description, which is what also happens to Kalicube. But on to geeky tips for content optimization for 2024 and beyond on branded search and beyond with Jason Barnard. So, Olesia, what are we going to start with? You said you've got about 150 things that we can do that are all very simple. What do we start with?
I do want to start with a total different thing. We know this search generative experience is a thing now, and everyone is talking about that. And what I've lately seen on Twitter and people wondering why, when you are doing a brand search, Google doesn't show the pages from the brand website. Nike, Reebok, whatever you name it. So they are showing lots of different links to third-party websites, social media, everything else, but they don't show a link to the website. So you might be particularly interested in what I have discovered because it refers to you. And if you share my screen, I'll show it.
Ooh, how exciting.
So I've Googled your company, of course, because you are like a benchmark in the industry for these kind of things, for branded searches. And of course, in your case, you do have this link right here to your website, and it's about page. So Google mostly, and I've Googled for some other companies, like including even myself, who have the optimized about page, like you teach to do that. And I've done after like your wonderful course. So people who have optimized their about page, big brands or not so big brands, they do have a link to their website in this new SGE box without any problem. And Google actually picks up a few things from there. So if you toggle the view, you can see which part is picked from where. And the very first, where you are describing your company and saying what it is, what you do, and what the audience is picked up very from your website. So it's very, very important. It's becoming even more increasingly important to optimize your about page and do it in the right way. And one more thing to consider, like I'm not a web company, but anyways, you should add images to your about page, because without images, like in my case, it doesn't look very nice. So you want to be looking very, very nice, like in this Kalicube case, like this.
Brilliant.
And not like mine. So it's becoming so that you are doing all these elements. The next thing I will be trying to experiment a bit. I'll be trying to add the video to my about page and see if it works and how it works in this generative AI description and the box and everything else.
Wow, that's brilliant, because I hadn't seen that. And that is actually a really good description of Kalicube. And it does show that Kalicube has communicated both to Bing Chat and to generative AI on Google exactly who we are. And it says, what is the Kalicube process? Which is an incredibly relevant question, because this is exactly what the Kalicube process does. You build understanding, you convince of credibility, you make sure your content is deliverable, including, as you said, the image on the about page, which I didn't know 5 minutes ago. Thank you.
Yeah, it's important. And even if you don't include, some people might say we don't need the image on our about page. What I discovered, okay, I was going to show that a bit later, but anyways, what I discovered is that if you don't like the image to be shown on your about page, you can include it into your open graph. And that's what here's my web page for Chiang Mai conference, and it's nowhere on my web page to be visible for visitors, but it's in my open graph. So it's picked up by Google, and it's shown that open graph is actually very important for Google, and I'll be talking about that in a while.
Brilliant. Oh, that was a surprise, a delightful surprise, and I'm terribly pleased, because I keep telling everybody the Kalicube process works for search engines, answer engines, and assistive engines, and in this case, answer engines with generative AI experiences. is hugely important, and I'm super pleased and overexcited, and I think we should talk about that for the rest of the show, except we're not going to talk about that. We're going to come back to images because that's what we promised. So what do people
not only
need to
images,
do for
images are a very small part of the content, so it's not like the only one thing. And I'm also like encouraging everyone to experiment with videos, as it seems that Google will be doubling down on those, including different formats, including like ordinary videos such as on YouTube, and including those shorts. So that might be very interesting field for experimentation. And also these boxes, search generative experiences, they are very good for competitor studying, for competitor analysis, to see what Google picks for your competitors into their branded search. Into these boxes, what links they consider to be prominent enough to be shown there. And you'd be greatly surprised, because you'd never think of these websites that they might have any impact, but they do, and that's something to pay attention to as well. So it's not only about content on your website, but it's about content on other websites, third-party websites, profile websites, and other like articles and all these things.
Which luckily is exactly what Kalicube does. So we're in the right place at the right time. And those little cards that we see are just the same as knowledge panel cards, which we've been working on for people. When you search my name, it's got knowledge panel cards, and we're figuring out how to manage those and how to optimize for them. And this just looks like what it is. The generative AI is simply a dynamic knowledge panel.
Yes.
Off you go. So what are we talking about?
Google has certain expectations. You may share the screen or you may not share it. I've just written a few points there that make it easier for people to remember what we are talking about and what really is important. Google has certain expectations towards your content. For example, when we are talking about images, and of course, the content of an image is important, how it looks is important, and the elements within the images are also important. But Google also looks at image dimensions and sizes. For example, if you are writing an article or a blog post and you explicitly mark up it as an article or a blog posting or something like that, Google is expecting you to use certain image dimensions and sizes. And usually, previously, they had them in their documentation. I've checked, they've deleted the precise images. They have only the precise images, dimensions, and sizes. But they have still that in Discover. And what they expect, if you want to be in this image tab, they want you to have the image, mostly it's 4 to 3 dimension. If you are trying to go too far away from these dimensions, it can be also square, and it can also be 19 by 16, as far as I remember. If you go too far away, if you are making it very, very narrow and long, or for example, very, very vertical for the articles where Google doesn't expect it, you may end up without any image shown in image tab at all, even if you rank #1 for that, and even if you like have it very well optimized and it has good content and everything like that, Google like highly prefers the dimensions to be as they expect it to be. Also, last time we talked about EXIF a bit and IPTC, and we were talking about that.
Just to come back to the image dimensions, if you can go back one, just one more comment on that, is that you said square, 4:3, or 16:9, which are the 3 standard formats.
Yeah.
And if it's wanting to show a square, but you give it a 16:9, it will crop the 2 sides. If it's 4:3, it will crop the 2 sides. If it wants to show a 16:9 and you've given it a square, it will crop the top and the bottom. So it actually crops the images, not always exactly the same on top and the bottom, for example. It will try to find where the important content is and crop accordingly. So what you can actually do, in our experience, is provide it with one single image and make sure it's croppable, as it were.
As it were, but you want it to, sometimes people want their image to rank in the image tab and want it to be shown, like I'll share another, like, for example, I was going to share that a bit later. For example, Edge SEO, I was experimenting with images here. It's mine. And you see that it's square, despite every other image is 16 by 9 or 4 by 3. Yeah. But because it's very, very relevant. I've made it, you see the content of the image. It's in the colors that Google expects to see. It's with the content that Google expects to see. It's actually in the size that is right what they want. So at the minimum bar. So they have the minimum bar for the sizes of 4 articles, 1200. So I've made it 1200 and put it there. But I made it square on purpose just to see how it works. And Google actually picks it up, despite I don't have any backlinks to the article. I haven't optimized it fully yet, and I don't do lots of other things with that. But because it's highly, highly relevant, and it's still in this threshold where it's square, Google picks it up. It's okay.
Right, and if you go back to the previous tab, are you the one in the generative AI?
What do you mean?
Well, in the previous tab that you just showed us, you showed us Edge SEO.
Yeah, of course, yes. So that was what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, sorry, it's because we didn't know. Sorry, I didn't know what to expect when I was looking at that. So now I do. So in fact, what you're saying is it works in Google Images and here, and what it's done is cropped it, because here it's a 4:3.
Yeah, because I didn't provide any other size. So yeah, it's surely you don't need to.
And that's a question. If you had provided it with a square image and a 4:3 and a 16:9, would it have used the 4:3 here and the square image on the other one? Okay.
Yes, it would.
So it's worth going the extra mile rather than doing what we're doing, which is making one image that's croppable, actually providing the 3 different formats.
You can also use image CDNs, and they do that automatically for you. And so you don't need to store and cut every image and have all the sizes on your server. You may use CDNs for that. But it's an experiment. It's my own website, and I don't make money on it yet. So I may afford doing these kind of things and see what happens just for the sake of it.
Okay, super. So for people who don't see what we're seeing Olesia's image appearing in Google Images and in Google Generative AI on search in the same format, just cropped. So
yeah, and I'm not even ranking #1 for the search, as you might imagine, but I'm in this box. I'm somewhere like very, very low. I don't even remember. Oh yeah, here am I. Very, very behind everyone else, but still I'm #1 for this generated block.
Which immediately brings to mind the dynamic knowledge panel concept, because that's how knowledge panels work too. So yes, 100%. We're all moving towards this idea, from my point of view at least, of dynamic knowledge panels. And the more I look at you showing me this, the more I'm getting excited. So anyway, carry on.
But I'll explain why I'm #1 there in a few moments.
Ooh.
It's because you will not. It's not something that you expect actually. And EXIF, in our previous talk, do you remember? I don't know. It's been 2 years ago, I think. So we talked about EXIF and metadata from images that Google uses. Lately, they explained that they don't use EXIF, and might be the case that they have never used it before. It's not clear if that's true or not. Like, some people tend to say that if Google says something, it's the contrary, and etc. But actually, there's nothing in EXIF right now that they might be using, except maybe for some GPS coordinates. But it's not clear if they actually have any impact on rankings. All the tests prove that they do not, at least at the moment. So because all these things like EXIF, IPTC, and XMP and other metadata and images, they actually weigh a lot. They might make your image very heavy. You might want to strip all this unnecessary data for your search, for the search, from these images. So to make them more responsive, more easier to load, and all these kind of things. But I suggest that you don't do that fully, because some IPTC and XMP fields are actually used by Google. So in some cases, you might want to use them. And like I'm using that for my Edge SEO image and for everything else. Their impacts is sometimes bigger, sometimes less. It depends on the niche highly. It depends on other factors. If you are unable, because sometimes when you are using WordPress or you are using some other CMS that strips this information from you, or some CDNs where they don't support also the usage, you might want to use Markup, because most of these fields that are used in IPTC and XMP, they can be used within your HTML5 markup, and you may use that data there. Even if you, for example, if you make a test and you try to get some information in IPTC and make other information in markup, you'll notice that Google ignores your IPTC information and uses your markup information when they contradict each other. But don't experiment that on your money websites, because you may lose this a bit of trust. Google is very, very, very strict on this trust thing, which goes with markups, schemas, and other metadata. So if you try to lie to them, they might like not believe you for a very, very long time. Sometimes it takes months to gain their trust back. So like if you experiment on some other website that is not very important to you, or on some articles that are not so important to you. But markup is very important. And in some experiments, markup is even more important than those IPTC and XMP. If you have very little resources and you don't have that much time, or you have too many images, and it's very hard for you to more optimize everything, and it will take you lots of resources to work with your CMS or developers, just do markup then. It works pretty well, like all those things, they are doing it nicer.
And to come back, to come back a point with trust. You talk about trust. That's hugely important. We're moving into a world now where Google needs to trust you in order to recommend you to its users, and you don't mess with that trust. It's not trust that you can build back easily. And the idea that trust is something that's easily won once you lose it is false. Would you agree with that?
Yes, of course, because for example, I've made when I was preparing for my Vietnam in Saigon session, I prepared 2 pages for events. They are very similar. So I've done everything similar on them, with the one exception. On my Saigon speech page, I've purposely made a mistake in a markup for event and uploaded it to and indexed it in Google. And what it led to is that my page was nowhere visible in search. And the other page, I made it right for my AI speech on another online conference, and it was ranking number 2 right under the actual event, and I've got like 30 clicks a day from that. But and nothing from this Saigon speech, just because of this very, very small mistake, which might be seemingly small for me, but for Google it's very, very important. When you're doing this mistake in a markup, which they consider very important, like for event, for a book, for anything else, and they catch on that.
When you say mistake, do you mean a technical mistake in the way you wrote the schema markup, or a mistake in the information contained in the schema markup?
Factual
information.
Mistake. Yeah, factual information. And,
so it's a mistake in the value rather than the name of the name value pair. That's really, really interesting, because I was talking to Jano Van Driel about that, and Olesia, who is the Kalicube Pro team lead. We've been discussing this discrepancies between what's in the schema and what's in the page, and you've just reassured me.
Say?
Well, it's hugely important to ensure that the content of your schema corresponds to what's in the page. Schema isn't there to override what's in the page. It's there to confirm and reassure Google that it's understood what's in the page.
But there are some fields, what I discovered for myself, there are some fields where they are loyal if there are small discrepancies, or if they are not shown on the page at all, they let you do that. But for event schema, where it's hugely important, like how much the tickets cost, the dates, and some other aspects, the addresses, and it might be a very, very big problem for you if they catch you. They don't necessarily catch you each time. I don't know why. It's somehow the extractor works, but if they do, like, you have problems.
Right, no, and it makes sense. I mean, it's looking, if we look at YMYL sites, events, obviously not in the same category, but it's hugely important for Google to give the correct information so it sends you to the right place at the right time at the right price. Whereas with information about a company and an about page would be less important because it's less critical in terms of the immediate satisfaction of the user or the trust of the user in Google.
If you don't mark up your pages, your event pages with event schema, and you have wrong factual information there, it somehow doesn't negatively impact you. That's what I discussed. So they are kind of taking different variables when they are ranking you. And if you are going to go with the wrong information on your page, just don't use schema to mark it up.
Brilliant. Okay, so, continue. Sorry, we've got sidetracked.
Yeah, we're talking about why markup is
0.5
is also important.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, why markup is really important, and it's one of the cases because I'm nowhere ranking on this page. I'm not number one. I'm somewhere below. And why does Google take my website to be number one in this result? Do you have any idea?
No, but you're going to explain it to me.
So it's not because of an image. It's also not ranking number one. The trick here is in metadata that I'm using on this web page, and metadata is markup, and it's very, very easy to see why Google prefers marked up pages over those that are not. And this specific term was marked up by me as a definition term. So Google, when crawling the page, picked it up and used it, even though I'm not number one for the query. So, like, it might work differently after some time, but right now it looks like that.
And what you mean by metadata is schema markup?
HTML5 tag. No, not schema. HTML5 tags.
HTML5 tags, and that's interesting because the example earlier on with the aside is that Google's not paying attention to asides at all and completely ignored it, and other semantic HTML5 metadata it does pay attention
to. You should look into the what they are saying. For example, John Mueller for aside tag told that they are thinking. I don't remember, I won't be able to give you a link, but he once mentioned on Twitter that they treat a site as a part of the content.
Okay, super, didn't know that.
In Google. And somehow he referenced Web3, or not Web3, but W3C standards, though we know that Google, when crawling, uses what WG standards, but that's something to look into again. But I think that for a site, Google considers that part of the content actually, because many people use it wrongly. And also the figure, for example, the tag figure, which should not be many people put images into figure tag. So Google has to find a way around to treat it as a part of the content anyways.
Yeah, and Google has a huge problem of so many people using things wrong that it has to mitigate for that. So what about context and basic stuff? Most important, and we've left the most important till last.
Yeah, because it's basic, you know. When you're saying something very, very basic, people go, oh, come on, I know this thing. But usually when you try to audit something or your website or other websites, you see that the context and basic things are not usually done, and that's usually the problem. So if there's only one thing that you might remember from anything we were talking about today, is that the context and basic stuff are playing the biggest part in the optimization process, be it images or text. So that taking your keywords, taking your entities into alt tags when we are talking about the images, and taking your text and important text elements,
Right.
phrases and keywords and entities into these tags like H1, H2, and into Google. Some people also mark up their content with internal links, A tag. A tag
Right.
is also very important for ranking this very page. So you might find out situations when you are putting a text and link to another website, and your page starts ranking for the term that you put into this A tag. And like if you're trying to rank another page for that term, that might be not always the best
Right.
use
Okay.
of doing that. So
Links.
it's also a ranking factor.
Links are super important. Internal links in particular, and you're talking here about
And
links
text
on
and text.
images.
I'm talking about here about the A tags, not about like internal links or some links, but the
What do you mean by A tag?
tags.
Sorry, that's not clear for me.
A tag, like HTML tag A. H,
Yeah, which is a
href.
link.
Yeah,
which
it
is a
might be a
link.
link, but you may link to this very page where you are at to enhance the
Right.
ranking signal.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so the A tag for me, I was just thinking link, and apparently there's a distinction that I don't necessarily understand. But that's the not point. We're running out of time really quickly.
Okay.
This is the last question, which is for me the most important: is how does content optimization, in this context, image optimization, help with branded search?
Like you are doing all the things that will help you to rank higher and to be presented in Google the way you want to be presented. And just it impacts directly how Google perceives you, and what we're talking about today clearly demonstrates the whole concept.
Brilliant. How Google perceives you, how it presents you, absolutely perfect. That was brilliant, Olesia. Thank you so much. And the thing is, I know with that long list we saw, and I also know because I know you, that there were about a gazillion other things you could have shared. Unfortunately, the show is only 30 minutes long. We'll have to have you back for that. Now we're going to present next week, which is Jason Davis. Pretty is easy, smart is hard. Jason is delightful. He has the same first name as me. Two Jasons on screen at one time might seem scary, but he's such a lovely chap and he's so smart. It's going to be an absolute delight. Could you possibly pass the baton, Olesia?
Jason is also one of the co-founders and CEO of Node Brand, digital advertising agency, and he also has a wonderful podcast. And it is one of the best podcasts by the version of Search Engine Journal, as far as I remember. So pretty is easy, smart is hard. It would be interesting putting this button.
Brilliant. Oh, sorry. Shall I let you do it physically? There you go. Oh, hang on. I've got this wrong. Oh,
I
no,
don't
it's
know.
not.
I don't know. I have only cup.
Yep. Pass him the cup.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
No.
this week it wasn't passing the baton, it was passing the cup from Olesia to Jason. Thank you so much, Olesia. That was brilliant. Thank you everyone for watching. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Olesia.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Kalicube. It's all about your brand SERP.